You ever feel like you're being watched when you're out in a beautiful place like this? Well, I certainly hope you are watching me. Since I have that feeling you are watching me, I want you to pay attention to this next video coming up. Hello, everybody in there. Are you treating for your mites? Have you done mite washes? If not, why not? Get out there and do it. I can't stress that to you enough. Also, are you feeding your bees? Most of the part of the country is still 1-to-1 sugar water. Getting into September here in the next couple of days, 2-to-1 sugar water. And then maybe bouncing back and forth with that. Keep your populations of bees up. Keep your mite loads down and get them fed. We're going to be doing a video here really shortly about different types of feeders, how they apply to different types of situations, different times of year that you can use them, and then some pros and cons against many of them. Also, in addition to that, towards the end, I may go on a little bit of a rant. I haven't decided yet, but saw a video not too long ago from somebody who actually ought to just chill out and stop calling us beekeepers stupid. So everybody, pay attention to this video coming up. We're enjoying a beautiful day here in the Northeast in Western Massachusetts, and we're going to have a great video coming up for you right after this. Hey everybody from Winnie Acre Bees. So I wanted to go over feeding. Everybody in the United States is in a dearth. I'm pretty sure of that. Some of us worse than others. Let's see. We have had no rain since May, early May, something like that. So we're about 4 months into a severe drought here in Western Massachusetts and northern Connecticut. So that is a problem. That's giving us issues here as far as dearth time. Surprisingly, we got some good honey out of this season, despite all that. But we've been keeping the bees watered pretty good. So our bees haven't had that issue to deal with so much because we provided them that water. But the topic for this video today is your feeding. I did a similar video like this last year, but I just wanted to do something fresh. This is really for new beekeepers, but you know, you guys have been doing this for a while too. Maybe you want to try something new and see how it's done. You know, whatever. I belong to a beekeeping group on Gab. If you sign up on Gab, it's a social media site. It's the only one I do, and I only do it just for educational purposes to learn from other beekeepers in the beekeeping group and to teach other beekeepers, new beekeepers also. I have local beekeepers around here that do watch these videos from time to time, and you know, they give me a thumbs up, which I appreciate. You know, it gives our new beekeepers from our class this spring in the association to you know, just see different things above of what they've been taught in basic beekeeping. So let's go over the feeder stuff, and then we're going to talk about times of the year to maybe use these, and then I want to go off on a different topic just for a minute or two about a video I just watched recently, and that'll be pretty much it for this video. So let's get started here. So there are different ways of feeding our bees. You know, if I'm not going to go into a big rant here about other people and what they do, but you have to feed your bees in a dearth. You have to feed them coming out of spring if there's, you know, weak colony. It helps build up a lot faster. So feeding some bees in the springtime that you overwintered, they've gone down to 10,000 bees in that colony. Giving them some feed right off the bat until that nectar flow really gets going. It just bounces back a colony huge. You can go from 10,000 bees to 28,000 bees inside of 2-3 weeks, maybe about 3 weeks, by feeding them, and then it just increases from there. So yeah, when your bees start foraging in the springtime, hit them with that sugar water. Right now we're in a dearth. There's no nectar, no pollen. A little bit of pollen from some sunflowers that they're bringing in, a little early goldenrod, but nothing sustainable. So our bees are hungry. We did remove honey from our bees. The bees that you see behind me, there's only a couple overwinters. The rest of them are new bees from this year. So they've been constantly getting fed, throughout the better part of July and August. and we're going to continue doing that. But we're upping that feeding to all of our bee colonies. Just brought probably about 10 gallons over to our farm bees today. Let them have at it, and we're not doing this every single day. It's not necessary. We want to give them some time to store instead of just putting that stuff in. We want them to be able to cap that off. We are using 1-to-1 sugar water right now, so pound for pound, a pound of water and a pound of sugar are equal, so that's 1-to-1. I use 10-pound bags. I mix 2.5 gallons, so basically 2.5 gallons of water and 20 pounds of sugar gives me 5 gallons of sugar water, and I'm going to go into that. So here we are, one of our most common feeders, Boardman feeder. Great feeder. I love these things. They're pretty awesome. Basically, this right here sets into the entrance of your colony on the bottom landing board, and your one quart mason jar. And if you have bigger, you can find bigger mason jars online, 32 ounces up to a gallon with a regular mouth on it. Hard to find, but if you can find them, that's great. But if you can see here, there are holes in that right there. Fill up your sugar water. Half a jar of sugar, half a water, hot tap water. Stir it in really good, and walk over, place that inside your Boardman feeder. The bees crawl in underneath here, and if you can see inside of there, they eat out of those holes. Great tool for springtime. Great tool for nooks and packages that you have put in, just like the next feeder I'm going to show you. I don't recommend using these this time of year. I will use these all the way up until I start seeing some bees from other colonies trying to get into the colony that this is sitting on. And once that happens, it's called robbing. So, bee yard can come unglued pretty good, pretty easy when you're using these entrance feeders at the wrong time of year. So springtime, throughout the summer for buildups and stuff, but once we get into a dearth, we shy away from these. The other feeder, which I don't use very often, but sometimes I do. This is a frame feeder. Some people call them a ladder feeder. And basically right here, there are holes in each end. And that allows the bees, once you fill this up, to crawl in here. There's perforated plastic material in here that they can walk down, and they can drink the water out of those perforations. And basically how it works, you take two frames out of your deep box. Let's pretend this is a deep box right here. You take 2 frames out of the side, place this in its place, just like that, and then you fill in your sugar water right here in one of these holes. It holds about a gallon. This tool is basically great for when you put a package in, install a package, when you install a nook, catch a swarm, do a split. Fantastic feeder. What I don't like about it is that if you were to put this in a 10-frame box like behind me, when I have 50,000 bees and 1,000 bees smell that sugar water from inside and they all try to cram down into this hole to get it, then excuse me, they wind up drowning. So I don't like using it for a big colony. So we're going to just set this aside, and we're going to grab another feeder over here. So this feeder right here was developed by a guy named David Burns out in Illinois. He owns Long Lane Honeybee Farms. I love this feeder right here, and I'll tell you a couple reasons why, and I'll actually show you one on a colony over here that I put on here yesterday. Basically, it is a little less, up to a 1/2 inch thick of plywood with a shim right here on the bottom of it, just to raise it up high enough, and it has a front entrance to it. Right here, I use this for my inner covers. One, it gives them ventilation during the summertime with these holes, and I'm not going to go into ventilation very much at all. I know some beekeepers say you don't need it, but I have to disagree. But that's what a lot of beekeepers do. They disagree with each other. But there's 2 holes right here with screen underneath, and that's so you can set a jar right here, just like that. You don't have to really disturb the hive at all. You just basically open up a box, put this feeder on top of it, and they'll drink through those screens underneath. This screen right here is on the top of it. Basically, you don't have to have this here, but I do on a couple of them, or I did. I won't make them anymore because I don't use pollen patties anymore. But you can take a pollen patty, put it on here, squash it through those screens so that the other side they can get to the pollen patty from inside the colony. So this is a Burns feeder system. I got a couple and I just made my own after that point, but I did buy a couple from Long Lane Honeybee Farms. So if you'd like to, get on their website, and it's honeybeesonline.com, and you can buy these boards. Really very inexpensive, and grab a couple of them to use. So that is that, and we're going to show you what that looks like actually on a hive in a minute. So one of my other favorite things to do is community feeding. Now somebody on Gab, the beekeeping group, put a video that he found from Vino Farms from like 2018 or 2019, something like that, and he was having a miserable time open feeding, and he got discouraged, and he told everybody, don't open feed your bees. I can't disagree with that more, and I'll explain to you a few reasons why and what he was doing wrong, why it wasn't successful for him. And if he just backs up his thinking a little bit and how he was doing it, it'll actually really work well for him. The first thing right off the bat when he started his video is he had community feeders right inside his apiary area. Absolutely, positively, never do that. You can open up a huge can of worms by open feeding, any type of open feeding at your colony site. These buckets get set up at minimum 50 feet away. I think where I set them up, I think it's like 75 feet. So it's a perfect distance so that the bees are drawn away from the colonies. They drink the sugar water, they bring it back. And so that was problem number one that he had. The second issue was he had a couple days, and I think it was the end of October or into November, up here. Now this guy's only an hour from me, so he has the same climate and everything as I do. He had a day that it was like 55 degrees, he said, and he saw his foragers out, so he says, well, I'm trying to get a last minute feeding in. We don't have days. If he had a day or two after that it was still going to be, sunny and 60 degrees, yeah, okay. But what was happening is that he set up his community feeders next to his hive. It was 55 degrees. He was trying to feed 2-to-1 sugar water, which is fine. I do that with my community feeders later on in September. And he was showing how the holes inside, and I'll explain the holes in a minute, but he showed how the bees were trying to get into the holes, and he says they're not drinking any sugar water. They're just, they're there, and the liquid's not going down. Well, the problem is that 2-to-1 sugar water, 55, 56 degrees, it actually congeals. It gets thicker out in that cold. So those little holes couldn't get the sugar water out. They couldn't get the sugar water out of those little holes. It just stayed inside the bucket. So he decided, well, I'll drill some bigger holes. Well, once he did that, the bees were able to crawl in through those holes, and they drowned. So he had those two things working against him. Never feed your bees community feeding when it's cold. If it's 58, 60 degrees and it's sunny, and you're going to get another day or two after that is that temperature and sunny and not windy, because you got to factor in wind chills too. That's perfect. When you feed your bees, you have to have a couple days after you fed them for them to take cleansing flights. Bees are very hygienic, so we don't want them having issues as far as not being able to take cleansing flights, because then they can get dysentery inside their hives, and you just got a host of problems if they can't go out and actually take cleansing flights. So but outside of that time of year, that cold temperature, is really a no-no for community feeding for bees. He showed all the dead bees he had around his community feeders and said, look, they're all dying, they're killing each other and everything else, and that wasn't the case. The problem is that they're drinking that cold sugar water on a 55-degree day in the Northeast. Little breezy out, so they get that sugar water on themselves, and the first thing they do before they go back to their colonies is they'll actually crawl onto the grass or a bush or something like that, and I'll show you that video also if you haven't seen it yet. And they try to start grooming themselves, but that air temperature and being wet sucks the heat out of them, and they just died right there. So he potentially lost like 1,000, 2,000 bees because of temperature. That's all that had to do was temperature. The video that I have that you might have seen or that you'll see after this is, you know, my bees flying around. You'll see them grooming, and then, you know, at the end of the day, there's no dead bees, maybe one or two on the feeder. So, so those factors are what discouraged him from open feeding. And I hope he sees this and revisits the open feeding for a couple of reasons. Right now, our bees are traveling 3, 4, 5, 6 miles to look for food. They're winding up in dumpsters. They're drinking orange soda. They're munching on somebody's leftover yogurt inside of that dumpster. So there's a host of disease and bacteria and stuff in there that these bees would normally be bringing back to their colonies after they consume it. Here, I set these community feeders up. I'm putting sugar water in there. I'm putting pollen substitute in there, and I'll explain that mix in a minute. A little bit of essential oils. It's from Honey Bee Healthy. So they're getting the best ingredients that I can give them as a beekeeper that comes close, not just as good, but comes close to what they would forage during the spring and summer, and bringing those nutrients back. And the other thing is they're not, these foragers aren't flying 3, 4, 5, 6 miles away to look for this food and exhausting themselves, and that's what ends their life cycle so early in that 45 day period. They're going 60, 75 feet off here to my left, and they're getting their sugar water and coming back. So I believe that you can give a little bit more longevity and a more lifespan to those foragers this time of year, because they're not traveling so far and working so hard to get these get that sugar back to their colonies. So let's go into community feeding. This right here is a bucket feeder. I saw this just like a lot of other people did on barnyardbees.com. He did a video back a couple years ago. He came up with this fantastic idea. It's really worked well for me and a lot of beekeepers I know. So right here is obviously our cover. We're going to pull that off. Make sure your cover seals this lid very good, because you're going to have to tilt this upside down. But if you look inside here now, I like to use the Lowe's and the Tractor Supply buckets. They have these grooves inside of here, and I hope you can see this good, but they have all these little pockets inside here. And if you look inside, you can see the holes right here in the bottom. And those holes are exactly in line with the bottom part of this rim right here. So when you put the lid on, you fill up your sugar water and tip it upside down, these crevices here get filled up with sugar water, and when they're filled up, they stop filling. The bees land in here and they start drinking that sugar water. 5 gallons goes a long way in a short period of time, trust me. The only thing I found was when I'm feeding all these bees here, community feed, there's so many bees, I mean by the thousands, trying to cram in here to get that sugar water, that they will shove each other down inside of these crevices, and some of them possibly drown in there. So what I do is I put stones, I cram a stone in each one of these crevices right here, and that way the stones stay there when I flip it back over, but also they don't cram themselves into those crevices and drown any of the other bees. Works very, very well. So 5 gallons would be 2.5 gallons of water and 20 pounds of sugar will make your 5 gallon bucket. Not 5 gallons of water, then you start adding more sugar to that and it just overfills. So 2.5 gallons of water to 20 pounds of sugar. Here is another one that I use, and I will take this bucket feeder here full, and I have one feeder, and then I'll go set this one up on top. This is a poultry feeder. Works fantastic. I like this galvanized one. I use a plastic one from Tractor Supply also. In either case, the one from Tractor Supply, the little petcock in the bottom that you unscrew to let the sugar water out, put a piece of screen or a stick in there so they can't crawl in that hole and drown themselves inside the bucket. But I will take a bunch of rocks. I will fill this tray up full of stone right here. Inside, 5 gallons. And you see this little tab right here? When you put the cover on, it pushes this tab forward and it opens, look in the bottom there, it opens that little stopper up and it allows the sugar water to fill this rim right here. Once you pull the lid off of that stopper, it closes. Okay? My only addition to this is a piece of screen that I put right over the top of this, going down both sides. because there is a little bit of room between the cover and the bottom and this drum right here, and it'll allow bees to crawl up inside in between those two, drop inside here, and then they drop into the sugar water and they drown. So that was something I had to fix. Easy fix. I put a piece of screen over it. I take this, I put the cover on it like this, and the lid is, once I put the cover on it like this here and lock it in place, the lid is actually heavy enough to carry the sugar water if you have to move it when it's 5 gallons. But works really good. So that is another way to feed your bees. One of the best things I like about my inner covers is this cover here. I don't know if I explained this already yet, but I'm going to actually show you how this works. David Burns from Long Lane Honeybee Farms, honeybeesonline.com. He created this feeder, so I'm going to show you how it works. But basically, it has 2 holes here to fit a 1-quart jar, setting on it like this. The jar has the holes in it like I showed you earlier, and on their side is the screen where they can crawl up the screen and they can actually drink from that jar from the inside. I don't like using pollen patties, but if that's an option, you can cut a hole, and his feeders boards come with this already here, but you can push a pollen patty through here and they can eat it from the other side. Has a upper entrance here. Just works really good. So we're going to take you over and actually show you that in colony right here. The reason why we set this colony up with this in-hive feeding is because they started to drop in populations a little quicker than I wanted them to, and we need to get some supplement feed right directly to them. So we're just going to go over here, and how that feeder works is you place the board on the top of your upper brood box right here. You can see the entrance right here that they have to go in and out. This is boards, feeder boards that I made out of, or feeder boxes I made out of shiplap, but you can take a medium honey super and do the same thing with it. Set it up on top of your inner cover that's got that feeding, and you can see right here, I don't disturb the bees at all. All I do is I shake a little of that sugar water down. You can see right there the holes. I'll shake a little bit down, get them enticed a little bit. Now I just put these on today, so they were full. They're starting to suck it down a little bit, but that's the easiest way to do it. You can see it doesn't have a spot here for a pollen patty because I just don't use them. I did put a feeder out here in front right here full of sugar water. That is about half, 3/4 the way consumed. I put an entrance reducer there. Try to prevent any robbing. If I see any robbing going on, I'll take that entrance reducer or that entrance feeder right off of there. So a couple great ways to get your bees fed. The other one that they use, a lot of commercial beekeepers use, is actually a bucket feeder, and they will take a setup like this with a hole in the middle that only has probably only has 1 hole in the middle, kind of like your typical boards, your feeding boards. Get this a little bit closer. I usually do these unedited, so I don't really cut and paste and everything like that when I do these videos. But they'll take a bucket and they'll tip it upside down on top of their inner cover, and they'll put that bucket. It's a special feeder bucket. You can get them from any bee supply place. It's got a screen on the bottom of it, and when they tip the bucket over, similar to the community feeders, they crawl up and they eat that sugar water right out of that bucket feeder. I do that for my farm bees because I don't get the opportunity to visit them as much as I do my swarms and splits out here, and so they can have a few days to consume a gallon of that sugar water, as opposed to having to run back and forth there to get that sugar water to them all the time. Our girls are doing really good. We got some temperature fluctuations coming in already. I'm going to pop this off first. No, I'm actually going to leave it there. Pay attention to your temperature and everything as far as that's concerned, as far as how you're feeding, when you feed, how much you feed. But a lot of people ask, well, when do you go to your 2-to-1 sugar feeding? 1-to-1, they have some time to cap it off right now. That's the reason why we go to 2-to-1 when it starts getting cooler, because they don't have that time to cap that off. So there's less moisture in that 2-to-1 than there is a 1-to-1. So it takes them less time to dry it off and cap it. We probably start doing that here. We pay attention to weather, but generally we start doing that around the second week of September. We'll start the 2-to-1 feeding. Now, let me explain the feeding process as far as I do it. I have a guy, never met him before, but talked to him online. He caught this little tiny swarm of honeybees, queen and a little tiny swarm. It was late in the season. I feel they were probably in an absconded hive or colony that they absconded from somewhere, and they were very small. And he was just, I'm going to try my best, but I don't know if I'm going to get them out of wintertime or into wintertime in enough. So he didn't know if he had enough time to actually, rescue this colony. And I told him, hey, it's a long shot, but try this. And just touched base with him just a couple days ago, and he said that that colony from last year till now is a double deep, full of bees, successful colony. And let me explain to you what you can do to boost your colonies right now. We've peaked out on our bee colonies. When the nectar flow stops and the pollen stops coming in, our honeybee queens have gone from laying 1,000 to 1,500 eggs a day to now laying 600 eggs a day, 700 tops, maybe even less than that. I have one colony right here, the first one in, latest swarm that I've ever got, and their population started to diminish, and I'll explain why. We got to the peak, so now our mart levels start going like this, and our bee populations start going like this because there's no food. Now, if we can supplement that community feeding, okay, take those community feeders, put them out. Now those bees start bringing in that honey that they think is honey or they think is nectar. They're bringing that back to the colonies. The queens all of a sudden get out of that, that doldrum that they've been in of no food coming in, and they see all this food coming in. So the queens go, okay, they're bringing in, my bees are bringing in tons of tons of nectar for my brood, so I can put more brood in here. They have plenty to bring in and feed them. Whereas before, the queens were like, okay, there's no nectar, no pollen coming in. I got to condense my colony. I got to stop laying so many eggs. I got to stop drones completely. No more drone laying, because all they do is eat anyways. And I need to save my colony from starving themselves to death and eating everything. So community feeding brings a simulated nectar flow into the queens and the nurse bees. The one thing that a lot of people do is they just feed the sugar water, which is perfectly fine. Commercial beekeepers are, doing this right now, feeding 1-to-1, and some places maybe up north 2-to-1, and they're feeding. They don't have time to add one thing, and that's called pollen substitute. What I did is David Burns from honeybeesonline.com, he's an EAS certified beekeeper. He put a level teaspoon of pollen substitute in his 1-to-1 sugar, and then added some feeding stimulant in there, because the pollen substitute actually dulls down that sugar aroma, so they're not as attracted to it. But once he put that feeding stimulant in there, a teaspoon of that, honeybee healthy, the bees flock to it. So honeybee queens need protein. With the sugar, they need protein. The brood needs protein. We need protein to survive, for our body to function properly. The bees are no different. So by adding that pollen substitute at a teaspoon per quart and a teaspoon of honeybee healthy feeding stimulant, it encourages them to eat it, and they bring it back, and they're bringing back protein. So they're storing it, and the workers and the nurse bees are consuming that, and they're feeding that to the queen, and they're feeding that to the brood. So now you have a simulated nectar flow going on. They think there's protein, because there is protein coming in. So it's just all the right ingredients to now get those queen bees to all of a sudden start bringing those populations way up. And that's what happened with this guy on Gab. I just suggested it to him. I said, hey, as a last ditch effort, give it a try. He did, and slowly, because it was late in the year, that queen put away enough brood in there to hatch and survive the winter, and came out in the spring. I believe he just repeated that process again, and supposedly it's really boosted his colony up to a full flourishing, from a 2 to 3 frame colony up to a 20 frame colony of bees. So fantastic, I'm glad to hear it. But that's what I do. Springtime, I will feed that pollen substitute out on a plate somewhere and just let them bring it in, just like bringing in pollen, which they're going to be bringing in soon afterwards anyways. But for this time of year, I'm getting my queen's protein, carbohydrates. She's taking off and starting, she went down to 3 frames, all the way up to 6, 7 frames again of laying, just like it was like the middle of June. And it brings your populations way up just in a very short amount of time. I continue that pollen substitute right until I button my hives up, until my last feeding. So they're getting that, and they're storing that away. Right now, the honeybees are just about consumed all of their bee bread, all of their pollen, which is the protein inside their colonies. And they're going to go into winter by feeding them just plain old sugar water. All they're storing is carbohydrates, which is fine. But our honeybee queens here, shortly after, about the end of January, the honeybee queens want to start laying eggs again. And that protein that they stored away in that sugar water is going to be there for them in January and into February, into March. And if you look back at a couple of my videos, I had a couple counties here that came out of wintertime. I think it was, gosh, I don't know, the 3rd week of March. We had a warm day. I decided to do my first hive inspection. I had 6 frames of brood towards the end of March, which is just unheard of. It's that pollen substitute that had that protein in there that really gave them that boost. And I had the population of bees in there. It kept that brood warm. That brood hatched. That was more bees to keep more brood warm going into the fluctuating temperatures in April. So it worked out really good, and it works out really good. The plus to that is make sure you put some feeding stimulant in there just to draw them to it. And once they're drawn to it, they'll eat it. So that's kind of it. Right now, we're still feeding 1-to-1 pollen substitute feeding stimulant, and we're doing community feeds once a week right now. We're still in a drought, 4 months, going into a drought 4 months. So we're actually going to step up the feeding here a little bit more, probably week after next. And we'll do twice a week going into September. Through the month of September, we'll do community feeds twice a week. Once we get the end of September and it starts getting cooler outside, if it does, if we start getting days that are, nights that are, in the 40s, 50s, and the daytime temperature is still 60, 65 degrees, we'll throw in these feeders inside here with the jars on top, and we'll feed them that way in hive. So that's it as far as the feeding. If you share a video, please share this one. And the reason for that is I just wanted to go off on a little bit of a tangent here for a minute, because I can't keep my mouth shut any longer. If everybody's heard of Peacefull Mind, go onto YouTube and put in the search Peacefull Mind. Watch the last couple of his videos. He's a funny guy, and he has some valid points. I can't knock him for that. But the one thing I will knock him for is that in the last couple of weeks, he's just gone after, he's gone on an attack mode. He's not a peaceful mind. He went out and attacked Bob Beanie. Now this guy is a phenomenal beekeeper. Yes, he's a commercial beekeeper. The guy knows his stuff. And then he went after David Burns here in his last video, at the start of his video. And I know David Burns and Bob Beanie and these guys, and even me, we don't need people to defend us. But he went after beekeepers in general, and I want to tell him to chill out a little bit. The title of one of his videos just like 2 or 3 weeks ago was "Beekeepers are stupid, they don't know what they're doing." Really? I've been doing this a while. I know guys have been doing this for 30, 40 years. They've made tons of money, and yes, that is a business. If we didn't have these commercial beekeepers, we wouldn't have any crops. Peacefull Mind, you have to accept that. We wouldn't have almond crops. We wouldn't have cranberry crops. We wouldn't have a lot of the peach tree crops. We wouldn't have a lot of the crops we have without beekeepers. If we just solely relied on the hobbyist beekeepers, that have 20 hives, or you have 140, you claim, active colonies. Don't tell somebody they're stupid because they did a video like I'm doing here about feeding bees. This guy Peacefull Mind out in Michigan says you don't have to feed your bees. Don't take their honey, you don't have to feed your bees. Well, I take honey. I want honey. I sell some of my honey, and a lot of beekeepers do. A lot of them want, they're just not putting hives up on their backyard just to stare at. They want to get some honey from them. So getting honey is a reality. And a lot of places like here, even if I didn't take any honey from my colonies, these bees right here would consume that honey by the end of this month. All the honey that they collected, if I didn't touch any of them, they would consume it all and have nothing for the wintertime. So you have to feed your bees, buddy. Whether you do or not is your choice. But we have to feed our bees. The other thing is that he says, that pesticides are the reason why all the bees are dying and killing his bees. Now, there is some truth to pesticides with honeybees. Now, if back here they go through and they were to come by here with a mosquito sprayer, or if these were tobacco fields and they came by with herbicides and pesticides and sprayed them right here, sure, I'm going to lose maybe all my colonies, maybe half of them, I don't know. But the pesticide issue isn't as big as you think it is. There may be some places they have issues with it, perfectly understandable. Then you go after to your agricultural department and you go after the guy who's spraying them, and you work with them and take care of that issue. You don't just get on there and say pesticides are killing your bees. You claimed coming out of spring that you had 140 colonies going into fall, and you lost half your colonies in the springtime. That they all died in the winter, and you didn't blame anything but pesticides. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. If you're losing 70 colonies of bees in a wintertime, you are doing something wrong or not something right. I'd be willing to bet you $1,000 that you had high mite loads and viruses killed your bees. Or you went into winter with some weak colonies, 70 weak colonies. I don't know how you're doing that, but they all died because they were weak. So pesticides aren't the problem. You really need to stop coming down on other beekeepers for what they do. Pay attention to your own bees, and like I always say, do what's best for your bees. Leave everybody else's bees alone. If you're a mentor and you see someone of your students or something, or you're doing videos like I am and you see something that they're not doing right, then correct that problem. If you don't have a solution for a problem, then you are part of the problem. If I see a problem, then I offer a solution to help with that problem. If you're just going to be pointing out all these problems that you think you see and you don't offer a solution, then again, you're part of the problem. Turn your comments on, Peaceful Mind. Turn your comments on. You have them shut off. You go rant and rave at all us beekeepers for the way we do things around the country that beekeepers have been doing for 50, 60 years and functions well, works well, and you come down on us for it because you may do something different. Every beekeeper is different, okay? So don't, there are things I disagree with other beekeepers online. Vino Farms and I have gone back and forth a couple times on certain things that we do or don't do. Upper entrances versus, no ventilation on the top. I could carry on about that for hours, and I can actually, as a firefighter, I could actually show you a mock-up of how ventilation works and how vital it is to your homes and how vital it is to these colonies. These colonies here aren't raised in trees. They're raised in these boxes. We put them in these boxes. It's a whole different environment than a tree out in the woods as far as your ventilation, as far as how their hives are there. We do them here in boxes. So we have to treat things different when we're raising them in these boxes, and we have to do things different and to help them survive and to help them grow and help them flourish. So Peaceful Mind, lay off the beekeepers are stupid thing. You do have a lot of valid points. You're hysterical in some stuff. Your political views are spot on about a lot of things. I agree 100%. No problem there. But don't come across and call other beekeepers stupid. The thing with David Burns was really uncalled for. He is educating people. His last video was, he's taken some videos to show results of different types of treatments. Apivar, Formic Pro, Mitaway Quip Strips, oxalic acid. So he's showing different videos. Go through his videos and see what he's trying to accomplish. If he comes out with a video that says, did Formic Pro kill my queen, and you come back and say, read the, you're just rude. You just attack him and say, read the damn instructions, buddy, blah, 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 blah. I use OA. That's all I use. I'm successful with OA. I don't use any other mite treatment at all because that works for me and that works for you. But it doesn't work for people's time schedules and things for other beekeepers. So calm down, Peaceful Mind. Have a drink, have a shot of moonshine, relax, smoke a little, whatever it is you got to do to just chill out, stop going after the other beekeepers. That's all I have to say on that. That's my rant for the month here. So my wife said I haven't been done a video in a while, so here it is. I'm going to throw a couple little things, blurps of videos out of the community feeding and how that's been working. And I had a video about a mite wash. I can't find it. I don't know what he did with it. I'm going to try to find it out, but get your mites under control now. Our mites here in Western Massachusetts are the highest that I've seen in a long time. They went from 0 to 2 mites, 2 weeks later to 12 mites in a colony. I couldn't believe it. And that's happening with a lot of our beekeepers, even some of our commercial beekeepers here in Western Massachusetts. The mites are very high this year in a very short period of time. So whether you do mite wash or not, treat your bees, do your mite washes, treat your bees again, treat your bees, treat your bees. I don't care if you got to do it, I do OA, I do 3 weeks, I give it a week, I do another 3 weeks right now because they're so high. Guys are having a good success with Mite Away Quick Strips, Apivar. Take a look at those too. Pay attention to weather, whether you have honey supers on. Some you can't feed while you're using it. So read the instructions and follow the instructions. You'll have good success treating for your mites. We'll wrap this up for right now. We're going to get this stuff put away. I showed you that colony there. Our bees, our foragers are all back. They're all bearding out here. Temperature change tomorrow. We're finally going to get, supposedly, but they've been telling us for weeks that we're going to get rain tomorrow. It'll really help things just a little bit. We're 12 inches in deficit in rain here in Western Massachusetts. Half inch of rain tomorrow isn't going to do much, but any little bit helps. And we'll just pray for some more rain soon. Everybody, please have a good rest of your weekend. Whenever you're watching this, have a great night. And we'll do another video here really soon. Have a good one.